In the last section, we started talking about a little program that we're going to put together to explore interfaces a little bit more. We had said that we're going to create two custom types. One's going to be an English bot and the other is going to be a Spanish bot. We're now going to start putting this example together. We're going to take a very naive approach and then we'll come back to it and talk about how we can fix an issue or two with it through the use of interfaces. So let's get started right now. I'm going to open up my code editor and I'm going to create a new folder for us to work with. So I'll go to File, Open. I'll make a new folder called Interfaces and I'll open it up. Now for the next part, I bet you can guess exactly what we're going to do. We're going to make a new file called main.go. We'll put package main at the top and then we'll declare funcMain right underneath it. Like so. Okay, so let's flip back over to our program diagram one more time. So we want to declare a custom type of English bot that's going to be a struct and a custom type of Spanish bot that will also be a struct. And then we're going to declare a getGreeting function for each one and a printGreeting function for each one as well. So let's get to it. Now we've already spoken a pretty good amount about structs and functions and all this kind of good stuff. So we're going to do the actual program implementation here pretty quickly. So underneath package main, we'll first start off by declaring these two new custom types. So we'll say type English bot is going to be a struct. Now you'll notice that in the past we had said that a struct has some fields or properties associated with it. In this case, there's really no fields that I want to associate with an English bot. So I'm not going to specify any properties or any fields here. I'm really just making this a struct so I can create some functions to work with it. So then we'll also say Spanish bot. That's going to be a struct with no fields as well. Again, I just want to create some functions that take the type English bot and Spanish bot as a receiver. Now I think that we'll first start off by putting together these getGreeting functions. So one is going to be getGreeting for the English bot and one is going to be for the Spanish bot. So underneath our funcMain, we'll say funcEB, which is short for English bot. We'll have a receiver of type English bot. The function's name will be getGreeting, and it will return a string. And then inside of here, we're just going to kind of pretend, we're going to imagine that the code inside of this getGreeting function has some very custom logic specifically for working with type English bot. And so the reason I'm kind of putting this imaginary requirement in here is because I just want to make it clear that getGreeting for both of these bots is going to contain some very different logic. In other words, it's really unlikely that we're going to want to reuse the code inside of getGreeting. In other words, one more in other words, we're really saying that the English bot and the Spanish bot have very custom implementations of the getGreeting function. Okay, so back over here, I'll put a comment in that just says very custom logic for generating an English greeting. And then underneath it, we will simply return the string hi there. So yeah, we're really just pretending here. Not a lot of super custom logic. We're just kind of pretending. And then underneath this function, we'll now declare our Spanish bot version of getGreeting. So we'll say func SB, short for Spanish bot, getGreeting, and it's going to return a value of type string. And then inside of here, again, we'll imagine that this has some very custom logic inside of it. And it's going to return the string hola. Cool, looks good. Now, one thing I want to point out to you, you might be sitting there thinking, Stephen, why aren't we putting the greeting text as like a field on the struct itself? Like, why doesn't EnglishBot have a field named greeting and it should be the string hi there? Again, we're kind of just using a little bit of a contrived example here where I just really want to point out to you, hey, look, both these types have a function that's called getGreeting, but they work on very different types here. Okay, now one other thing I want to point out about both of these functions that is completely unrelated to interfaces, so I do want to inject one extra little topic in here as well. Remember that in all of our time with Go, the compiler has always complained if we have defined a variable without actually making use of that variable. And so in both these functions, you'll see that the receiver portion is taking in the actual receiver value as EB and SB. But in neither of these functions do we actually make use of that value. And so this is a completely optional change. We do not have to do this, but if we are not making use of the actual value here, we can remove it entirely and just leave the receiver type right here. And so this is completely equivalent. We are just able to omit the value because we're not actually making use of it inside of our function. So I'm going to do that in both cases here. Okay, again, totally unrelated to interfaces. I just wanted to throw it in. Okay, so now that we've got our getGreeting functions put together, I want to now create a printGreeting function associated with each type as well. And so this is going to be the point at time at which we start to get the feeling, wow, both these functions have some very similar logic inside them. It sure would be great if we could somehow reuse the same function with both types. So let's put the implementation together for both of them. We'll say func printGreeting. This first one will take an argument that we'll call EB of type EnglishBot. It's not going to have any return value because it's just going to receive this argument and then print something out. So we'll say format println eb.getGreeting, like so. So I bet you can imagine what's going on here. We pass in the EnglishBot. We call getGreeting, which returns the language or the greeting in that particular language, and then we print it out to the command line. That's pretty much it. Now let's also create a separate function specifically for the English, or excuse me, the Spanish bot as well. So we'll say func print greeting. Now this one's going to take a value that we'll abbreviate as SB, short for Spanish bot. It'll be of type Spanish bot. And then we'll do basically the exact same thing in here, where we call sb.getGreeting. Okay, now when we save this, you're going to see a little error message print up here, and it says, hey, you've already declared printGreeting inside of this file, essentially. And so we cannot declare the same function 2 times inside of one file, just as we did right here, even though they are of different types as arguments. So I know other languages that you might be familiar with. I know off the top of my head, this is going to really date me back to like when I was a young teenager, but Visual Basic, I think, supports overloading. I think Java supports overloading. Maybe C# does as well. But essentially, we cannot have functions with identical names. Nonetheless, I'm going to leave this code in here for just a minute, just so we can look at it and say, yes, they are very similar in nature. It sure would be great if we can condense both these down to one single function. So yeah, I know there's an error here, but we're just going to leave it for a minute. So now the last thing I want to do is create 2 values, one of type EnglishBot and the other of SpanishBot, and we're going to attempt to call the printGreeting functions with both of them. Okay, so we'll say EB, short for EnglishBot, is going to be EnglishBot. This is how we declare a new value of type struct when the struct has no fields associated with it. So we just put the empty curly braces in here. And then we'll do SpanishBot as well. Okay, so now the very last thing that I want to do, I want to call printGreeting with each of these 2 bots that we just created. So I'll say printGreeting EnglishBot and printGreeting SpanishBot. All right, now when we save this file, we're again going to see an error here that says, hey, look, it looks like the types here are messed up. Again, it's because we defined the 2 functions with the same name here. Now, at this point in time, we're not going to actually run this program, but I think you can. At this point, I have really drilled it in enough that, wow, this printGreeting function sure looks like it contains some identical logic in both, for both the EnglishBot and the SpanishBot. Now, if we wanted to fix this error right here, we could say, comment this one out, and then we would comment out the SpanishBot one right here, leaving us with just the printGreeting for the EnglishBot. So clearly at this point, gee, life would sure be a lot easier if we could pass both the SpanishBot and the EnglishBot to this one function. Like, gee, I just want to reuse the code inside of here because there's really nothing inside this function right here that really makes me think that I can only use this on a Spanish or an EnglishBot. So clearly 100%, I know I've repeated it 30 times now, you're 100% tired of me saying it, but this function clearly contains some logic I want to reuse. So with that in mind, seeing that we have a function here that we now want to somehow make use of with these 2 completely different types, let's take a quick break. We're going to come back in the next section and we're going to start introducing interfaces, and we'll talk about how this interface we're going to create is going to solve this issue of somehow reusing this one function between these two different bots. So quick break, and I'll see you in just a minute.